I am feeling more intimidated in this talk than probably any that I've delivered in my lifetime so far. Not just because of the numbers of people and the wonderful faces I see in front of me, but because the topic concerns the greatest of all things, a reality which is beyond our very limited words. It is the Quran, and what is the Quran? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقُرْآنِ? Well, the first thing that will appear, if you look in the definitions online or in the dictionaries, it is a book, it is the book of the Muslims, and so the starting point is that the Quran is a book. And many of us would start to explain it that way. Well, the Quran is this book. And my purpose today is to tell you the Quran is not a book. Yes, I'm going to tell you the Quran is not a book, but you're going to say, Sheikh what he means is the Quran is not just a book, it's a very special book. No, I'm going to say to you, maybe it's not a book at all. Maybe we're making a mistake when we say that it's a book. Let's see. This is not the craziest thing I'm going to say today, inshallah. So let's say that you go into the masjid and you hear the Quran being recited. You have a beautiful spiritual experience. You are experiencing the Quran, but there's no book here. You hear the whole Quran in the Taraweeh without having to encounter a thing that we would normally call a book. And then you go home and you go onto Quran.com and you open up and you click on the surahs and you explore and you browse and you click on the recitations and you listen. Is Quran.com a book? Is it an e-book? Is it an audio book? Maybe we need to expand the meaning of the word book, or maybe we need to think of the Quran as being more than just a book. Maybe it has always been multi-format in the way that we have different formats that we encounter it today. But of course you are saying, Sheikh, you don't know? Have you not heard the Quran is called Kitab? You're bursting to say it, right? كتاب أنزلناه إليك مبارك ليدبروا آياته وليتذكر أولو الألباب. Kitab. The Quran is Kitab. But if you go onto Al-Bahth al-Qur'ani, you look in an Islamic Arabic dictionary and you look at the word Kitab and what does it mean in the Quran, you will find that Kitab means a lot of things and a lot of different ayat and contexts. You will find that sometimes it is Allah's decree and His law, or it is a contract that has taken place. And sometimes, even if it's in writing, it is not a book, it's a letter. So the Queen of Sheba says, إِنِّي أُلْقِيَ إِلَيَّ كِتَابٌ كَرِيمٌ. Was a book thrown at her? At times we realize that it is not talking about a book, it is talking about other things which the word Kitab extends to. What do we get from knowing that the Quran is called Kitab? We get that it is a clear communication. We get that it is a binding decree. And we get that it is a lasting source for us to go back to. So there's a reason that I'm resisting this idea of the Quran as a book, or trying to just take it apart and get us to look at the Quran in some different ways. The reason is that when we think of it as the book, or when we confine it to the covers, there's also a kind of limitation that happens in our mind. What does it mean to have a relationship with a book? When we talk about a relationship with the Quran, the first thing we need to do is get out of the limitation of seeing the book, but to see the Quran in other ways that it actually exists. So, before anything else, the Quran is the kalam of Allah. It is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is how, when the scholars go about defining the Quran, they say, it is kalamullah, al-munazzal ala Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, al-mahfuz, sometimes they say, bayna al-daffatayn, min al-fatihati ila al-nas, al-muta'abbad bi tilawatihi, al-mu'jiz, bi-aqsari suri, etc. So, these are aspects of the definition to get us to understand what we are referring to by the Quran and to exclude other things. But at core, before anything else, the Quran is and was Allah's speech. And as soon as we think of it that way, it takes us into a transcendental realm beyond what we can really properly understand and appreciate. Before there was anyone to speak to, was Allah's speech. The Quran belongs to something primordial and prior to the creation, prior to our world, prior to the Arabs. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed this final messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and blessed his ummah with the revelation of this Quran to be their lasting guidance until the end of time. Some of the narrations from the likes of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma tell us about the transference of the Quran to al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet. Is it a book? It's a kind of book, but it's a book beyond our imaginations. And they tell us about the transference of the Quran to the lowest heaven, as-sama' ad-dunya or sama' ad-dunya. And in some of the narrations, he says, Ibn Abbas says, وَكَانَ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ. And this is an expression that I have pondered at length and tried to look into the statements of the scholars about it. It is always going to be mysterious. It was at the places of the stars. It was at the positions of the stars. As if before the revelation down to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Quran was present in the sky above us, in space, in a way that, again, cannot be thought of as a book. How did it exist there? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by the positions of the stars. فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسَمٌ لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ إِنَّهُ لَقُرْآنٌ كَرِيمٌ فِي كِتَابٍ مَكْنُونٍ لَا يَمَسُّهُ إِلَّا الْمُطَهَّرُونَ. In Surah Al-Waqi'ah, Allah Azza wa Jal combines between this oath by the positions of the stars and emphasizing the significance of this Quran. It is a noble Quran in a preserved book. So the Quran, rather than being described here as a book, is in a book. And this book is protected. None of the people or the devils who have a filthy hand and some evil agenda can get close to it. لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. So there is a celestial event of the revelation of the Quran pointing to its significance, pointing to the care that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has invested in the revelation of this Quran. And you know what's really quite amazing about these ayat? Is that the word nujum in the Arabic language has a few meanings. So nujum, the most obvious sense is what? Stars. But do you know that when someone pays something in installments, these installments are called nujum? And when they refer to the division of the Quran and how it came progressively over 20-something years, this is called the tanjim of the Quran, the division of the Quran into nujum. It was going to come down according to its times. Mawaqi' al-nujum. So there is a connection then between the Quran or the parts of the Quran and the stars. It is in a book and it is guarded. These nujum are protected by rujum. وَلَقَدْ زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحِ وَجَعَلْنَاهَا رُجُومًا لِلشَّيَاطِينَ. So those devils will be pelted away and chased off from interfering or from hearing what they have no right to. And so the Quran came, as you know, from the beginning, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق, up until some 20-something years later, the last revelations came. The Quran came, najman najman, piece by piece. And the Prophet ﷺ would receive this from Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, And he would recite also to Jibreel alayhi salam. And then he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would recite to his companions, and they would hear and be moved by the words and the eloquence of the Quran, the impact and the meaning of the Quran, the message and the transformative power of the Quran. And they would be moved and delighted, scared and hopeful, and all of the ways that the Sahaba responded directly with this connection. A connection which we want to feel, but perhaps can never feel quite in the way that the Sahaba did, as it was being sent down for them and in their times and connected with the events of their lives. Sometimes the Prophet ﷺ would recite to them a whole surah. He would recite to them Surah Yusuf. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alif Lam Ra. Tilka ayatul kitabil mubin. إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. Even here, it refers to the kitab. These are the ayat, there's the signs of the kitab. And then the scholars of tafsir say the kitab may be the Quran itself. The kitab may here mean the surah by itself. But these ayats are being recited, and imagine now, the companions are not holding a book like you do now. And they were not holding the phones and the apps like we do now. Rather, they were hearing it as it was being revealed. It's being unfolded for them, ayah by ayah. And the Quran for them is not a book in the way that this very weak word in English conveys. It's kitab, but it is so much more than a book. So, as well as the recitation, the Prophet ﷺ would also indicate to his companions and his scribes to write down the Quran. And here again, they are writing in fragments, in pieces, right? They would write a piece of the Quran here and a piece of the Quran there, until later they would be brought all together, and later this mushaf would be copied and converted into a coherent thing that we can start to call a book. But before this time, the ayat are coming, and the Prophet ﷺ is instructing them, put this in this surah. It belongs here. This ayah, these ayat, this najm which has come down, it will go into this surah. Put it between this part and this part. And he would instruct the scribes. How do you think it's coming together? It's coming together to match how it was in the heavenly realm. In Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, there is a prior order and structure, and now that prior order is forming now into what we come to recognize as the Quran when it was finally revised and the revelation was completed and the Prophet ﷺ left this earthly realm. So as they wrote it down, you start to see the surahs in ways that you did not before. Now, if there's any slide that will get me takfired, it will be this one. I was pondering on the nature of this qasam. فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ. And I was thinking about a surah. Could a surah be thought of like a constellation? Is a surah a collection of things that were the stars? And when you look up into the sky, you start to see some shapes and order, which you actually gain that sense of order after some time and some experience. First of all, it takes time. You go out and your eyes are not yet ready to see the stars. You have to stay there for some time. And then you start to discern. Then by learning, someone can tell you, do you see the shape? This is called Orion the Hunter, and this is the Big Dipper. And so with the surahs, with time and tadabbur, you get to recognize their structure. But you know what's even more azim than this? And this will take some concentration for a moment. When you ask the astronomers, they will tell you, actually, these things that we see as 2D constellations, they are not actually stars that are next to each other. That's just the perception that we have. Actually, some of them are closer and some of them are much further away. Therefore, the time that it takes for the light to reach you from the different stars within one constellation or one surah might be light years apart. Light years is distance. It could be years apart for how long it takes for different stars' light to reach you within one constellation. So look how even within a surah, in Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, the ayat are coming, and then they are coming over the coming years in Medina, according to the events. And then they fall into place in this perfect constellation, which we know as Surah Al-Baqarah. And then when we read it, we don't see the whole history behind all the individual ayat and the nujum. But by learning and studying and how the scholars have traced these things, we can appreciate it on that level as well. Can you see the Baqarah there on the left? And the other one? Anyone know which surah it's meant to be? An-Nahl. An-Nahl. Okay, I'll work on this for next time. This is AI stuff. We have to make use of the tools that we have. So we know that the Quran then came into some forms of books. But the Sahaba didn't see what you see. What we have here, this is one of the copies of the Quran, which is attributed to Uthman radiallahu anhu. It is kept in Sayyidah Zainab in Egypt. And he's not writing it, by the way, he's just looking after it, I don't know. So this is how the so-called book was even at this time. Many, many large pages. This is not for carrying and convenience. It's just for preservation. When we have this kind of book, we have a beginning and we have an end. The start is the Fatiha. After we read the Fatiha, we forget about the Fatiha. Because in a book, you have a linear process and the beginning is done. But if you ask any scholars about the Fatiha, they will tell you the Fatiha is intimately connected to everything in the Quran. And everything in the Quran goes back to the Fatiha. How can we see that in this book? Maybe if we hold it like this, we can start to think about the Fatiha is on the top and everything is connected to the Fatiha. But the book, you see, limits us. We spoke about Salat al-Taraweeh. At the end, when they do the Khatm al-Quran, when the Imam says, Min al-Jinnati wan-Nas, the next rak'ah, what do? Alif Lam Mim. It goes back to Surah Al-Baqarah. Why? Because in this concept, Surah Al-Nas is connected to Surah Al-Baqarah. So maybe the Quran is not a linear book, maybe it's a circular book. Maybe. I'm going to give you some crazy ideas today, just because, I don't know, maybe it will wake you up, maybe it will shake you up, I don't know. But look here, a circular book. Could we make it? Then we have, this is a page of Quran.com. Sometimes we go back to the page concept. This is a kind of relic of how we have been reading the Quran. But in digital format, you can get rid of the linearity and also the cutting up that happens. When we have things on pages, there's only so much you can fit on one page. So if this image here on the bottom is looking like a world, the Quran is a world, I want to play on that a bit more. Here is the Quran as a world. By the way, I'm very proud this is not AI. I made this in Photoshop myself, right? Before the AI was a thing, okay? This is maybe going to be the cover for my book. Based on my PhD thesis, it was about tafsir al-Quran bil-Quran, explaining the Quran through the Quran. So I wanted to visualize, what I get from this whole experience of seeing how scholars are explaining things in terms of each other. So maybe a continent is like a part of the Quran, and a country is like a surah of the Quran, and an ayah is like a city, right? And maybe you can see the connections between things that are next to each other, the cities that are next to each other within a country, the countries that are next to each other within a continent. Maybe you can jump from one surah to another, from one ayah to another, and make connections. These are flight paths. But you see, it's not automatic. You might have to make that flight. The mufassir also. The person reflecting or the person explaining the Quran from a tafsir perspective as well, they make connections. They fly from one place in the Quran to another. So this is just, I'm trying to open up your horizons in seeing the Quran in different ways. It's going to get worse. Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَذَلِكَ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ رُوحًا مِّنْ أَمْرِنَا ما كنت تدري ما الكتاب ولا الإيمان ولكن جعلناه نورا نهدي به من نشاء من عبادنا وإنك لتهدي إلى صراط مستقيم. Focus here in the beginning. روحا من أمرنا. We inspired you with a spirit from our command. A spirit. The Quran is not a book. The Quran is a spirit. It is inspired. And I want to connect that with a different concept here. The Quran is an intelligence. That's why you can have a relationship with it. That's why you can have a conversation with the Quran. The Quran is an intelligence. And you know, as technologies develop, we get some more analogies that we can use to appreciate the Quran, not the other way around. I'm not trying to make the Quran fit these analogies. I'm trying to use the analogies to help us appreciate what we already have in the Quran. The Quran is a super intelligence. You are now all the time on ChatGPT getting your homework and assignments done. You have become a prompt engineer, mashallah, graduated in prompting studies, right? So how do we prompt the Quran to get from it what it contains of super intelligence? When I watched the podcast, did you see Al-Bawsara Al-Qur'aniyya, the Quranic Compass, by Sheikh Naif, who's with us today? I saw that and I thought, mashallah, this is a great prompt engineer for the Quran. That's what we want to be, someone who goes to the Quran and asks the right questions. And that connection with the Quran and knowing how it gives its intelligence and gives its light and gives its guidance, all the things mentioned in this ayah, that will increase our understanding and our collective intelligence. I only have a couple of minutes. This is just, prompt engineering for the pictures. The Prophet ﷺ described the Quran as having certain parts which correspond to things that Allah had revealed before. So we can start to see the Quran with its structure. Even if we are reading it as a book, we don't have to see it as just one piece. We can see that it has surahs. We can see that the Sahaba used to sometimes divide it into the readings of a week, into 7 parts. Do you know Fami bi Shawq? Look up Fami bi Shawq. It's very nice, right? So this will tell you what to read if you want to complete the Quran in 7 days. Then people divided the Quran into 30 parts. To read in what? In 1 month. Not Ramadan, by the way, every month. But what do we do between Ramadans? What if we thought of the Quran as 46 parts? Bid'ah, you say, bid'ah. Well, it's just following the same reasoning of how we connect with the Quran in ways that are practical, that provide solutions for our needs. I looked at the fact that between Ramadan and Ramadan, nobody talks about what we read. There is no collective culture of reading. So with Quran.com, we devised the Quran in a year program. This is what everybody needs to sign up to. This is my message for you. Every week you have, this is your reading, this is what we are doing together. Read it with understanding. Read it simply. Encounter the Quran, appreciate the Quran on the basic level, on the beginning level. And then with that level, you can move up. We make things easy for you. We give you a podcast. Oh, I don't even want to read. So listen. And then, inshallah, you will read and you will gain that literacy and gain that familiarity and gain that love and that passion and that thirst for the Quran. I want to just conclude with, this is the way of the Sahaba. Not exactly like this to read between Ramadan and Ramadan, but to take things at a pace that they can handle. So Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami narrated that the companions used to take 10 ayahs and they would not move to the next 10 until they got everything from these ayahs of ilm and amal. Ilm and amal. Both together, the knowledge and the actions. So we learn knowledge and action together. This is what we want. We want to move from level to level. First, we have to encounter the Quran. We have to break the barrier that says, I can't read this. It's too big. When am I supposed to fit this in? But then on the other side, people who tell you quantity, quantity, quantity. And even apps that are built to tell you, finish, 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 finish. Complete, complete, complete. We want to change our sense of what it is to complete the Quran. We want to complete all the things that we need from it. All the things that we want to gain from the Quran. This is my advice for you and me as seekers of knowledge. This is my advice for teachers in how they talk about the Quran. And my advice also for fellow technologists in how we should be presenting and supporting people in that. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.